Hey everyone, I'm NornQueenAlexis and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to this video where we go over 9th edition. So 9th edition is coming out, well, actually in a few days. By the time I release this video, it'll probably have come out already. Actually, no, probably not. I'm going to try to release this video as quickly as possible. So today we're going to be taking a look at matched play. Now you may notice something weird about my rulebook. I put a lot of little tabs in it. I highly suggest that you do this for any and all of your rulebooks, codexes, and anything that you use throughout any of the gaming hobbies that you play. Whether this be War Machine and Hordes, 40k, Kill Team, Aeronautica, you know, any of the various games. These make searching the book a lot easier. So today we're going over matched play rules. So match play is much similar to what it was last edition, with a few exceptions, and I keep hitting this with my chest. We have the Eternal War missions, as well as the Crusade missions, I believe are in match play. Nope, that is in narrative play. Actually, I think they're in their own separate little section. So, match play has a lot of different things to go over. There's a ton here to get into. So I thought we would just dive into it today because I've actually looked at this. It looked pretty similar to what I expected from earlier editions up until now. If you've played anything through 4th through 8th edition, you'll notice that a lot of these things look very similar. So we have the select a battle size, either combat patrol, incursion, strike force, or onslaught, and each of these can take up to 1 to 4 hours. Right off the bat, we have that. Most players are just gonna say, hey, do you wanna play a 2,000 point game? Actually, I think the most common way to play the game is 500, 750, 12,000, 1250, 1750, 1850, and 2,000. Those are the most common size of playing this game. So a lot of this stuff is kind of a little bit silly in a sense. So combat patrol, incursion, strike force, and onslaught are broken up into point limits. Now it's 500 points, 1,000 points, 2,000 points, and 3,000 points. And based on the size of your game, you actually get command points. So the most common will be strike force at 2,000 points, which gets you 12 command points, which you can use to buy your detachments. Yes, in this edition, you need to buy your detachments, which personally I like. It's a good change, unless your warlord's attached to it, in which case you don't need to buy that detachment. You get that detachment for free. So, details on how to select the warlord and information, blah, 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 blah. Not important. Determining a mission. You have the combat patrol missions, the incursion missions, the strike force missions, and the onslaught missions. And these vary on these sides of the game itself. So at 2,000 points, which is what we're going to be talking about, you're going to be doing the strike force missions, which take place on a 44 by 60 inch table, which is slightly smaller than a 6x4. In fact, I think it's 6 inches lost on each side. Personally, kind of irks me a little bit. I don't know why it bugs me as much as it does, but it really does, and I cannot for the life of me explain why. I know that deployment zones will actually have gotten smaller, but the distance between two armies is pretty similar to what it was, but at the same time it irks me. Don't know why. I, for the life of me, can't figure out why. I think it's because all playmats are 6x4s, and we're so used to 6x4s that, and 6x4 has been the thing all the way since 4th edition. So it's kind of bugged me just a little bit. Just a little bit. So, moving on, you read the mission that you chose. Now there's 6 missions for a strike force. There's retrieval missions, frontline warfare, the 4 pillars, which I really like, no man's land, scorched earth, and vital intelligence, which is something that I'm surely lacking. I wish I had some intelligence. I repeat, we have no intelligence. Anyway, just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. Don't make a joke like that. I'm very sensitive. So you go ahead and you look over at your missions themselves, which appear on the next few pages. And we have the combat patrol, the incursion, and where is it? Strike Force missions, which start on page 295. So we're gonna take a look at those in just a second. Now, then you have to read your mission that you get, because in this edition, which I think is cool, so let's go over to page 295. One second, turn the pages. Interesting enough, when you select your mission, the mission already has a deployment zone. The mission has its primary objective, and then you have your secondary objectives. And we're going to get to those really quickly. Primary objectives are pretty quick and easy to understand. They're the essential things that you have to do. You can score a maximum of 15 victory points per primary objective that you achieve, which gives you a total of 45 points. The secondary objectives can get you a total of 45 points as well, and they can only max at 15 points per objective that you achieve. So you can't overextend. Actually, I think it's 45 points. Nope. For a maximum of 15 points per one for the primaries. Secondaries are a little bit different. You can actually exceed them, but you can only ever get 45 points from your secondary objectives. So we'll get to secondary objectives in a minute. The missions in this edition and the missions in matched play are geared towards tournament players. They are essentially the ITC mission packet from Nova and from LVO, as well as from, here comes the big brain time, Adepticon, just thrown into here and given a little bit more balance, in my opinion. Don't message me while I'm working, that's rude. Anyway, back to it. So, once we go over the primary missions, which we're going to look at the Eternal War Strike Force mission, Retrieval mission. I know there is a lot of missions that I just said. Mission briefing tells you exactly what you need to do, blah blah blah. Victory points are awarded for collecting objective markers as following. Taken hold. At the beginning of each player's command phase, the player whose turn it is scores 5 victory points for each of the following conditions they satisfy for a maximum of 15 points. They control one or more objective markers. They control more objective markers, or they control more objective markers than their opponent controls. Now in this mission, there's 6 objectives. So you have 4 in the middle, 2 in the player's deployment zones. It looks like Hammer and Anvil deployment from the previous edition, so that should be easy enough to keep track of. Alrighty. So at the beginning of each player's turn, player who scores 5 victory points for each of the following conditions they satisfy. So at the beginning of each player's command phase. So that's actually really interesting because you can score victory points on your opponent's turn, but it's only to a maximum of 15 victory points per turn. So to get the 45 victory points for this, you would have to consecutively do these things for 3 turns, which, as we know at games of 40k, turn 3 really is the deciding factor on whether or not you won or lost a game. In fact, end of turn 2, bottom of turn 2, it's pretty much, you know how the game is going to go. At turn 3, at the end of turn 3, you definitely know if you're going to win or lose. Now, there are some strategies that do affect late game, and there are some things that you could do late game in order to best your strategies. And with the primary objectives, you can actually do those late game if you have a meager force left. If you just have like 15 Genestealers left, you can still manage to get 3 objectives and still manage to win. So keep that in mind. These missions are meant to make games longer. The 7th edition, or 8th edition, I don't think I had a game that wasn't determined by turn 3. Like, at all. Just flat out. In fact, a lot of the times the deployment really determined whether or not I was going to win. So, secondary objectives. In this mission, when players are selecting their secondary objectives, they can, if they wish, choose one of them to be the minimalized losses, and which is right here. So this one has a secondary objective that you can choose, but you don't have to for this mission. You can actually go over to the secondary objectives, which for some reason I did not pick out. I don't know why. No, wait, yes I did. We can go over to the secondary objective page and actually start reading through these and choose these instead. So, that's pretty much the basics of how to deploy for the mission. And it's pretty similar to everything. The only big thing is that we have a bunch of different deployment zones and everything in this book, which goes down to, and I can break these down really easily. Are you ready? Hammer and anvil. Okay, 24 inches in between each other. The objective marker is what, 4 inches away from your deployment zone on both sides, 1 in your deployment zone in the middle of it, and 1 in your opponent's deployment zone, 16, 17, 20 inches away from you. Pretty simple. Hammer and anvil, table quarters. Once I can turn pages, this would be really useful. Again, hammer and anvil and Dawn of War. We have the ridiculous one that absolutely no one wants, which is Vital Intelligence. Again, we have no intelligence. If you get this one and you're playing a casual game, highly suggest that you just skip it. Just skip it. Don't do this mission, just re-roll it. But if you're playing in an actual tournament, you are going to need to know how to do this mission. So it's good to know. And it actually explains it a little bit better on the sides here by telling you the corners are 15 by 20, so really useful. And each one of these has secondary missions that we could go over, and we probably will go over. Oh, sorry about that. A little bit of food later, and I'm re-energized and ready to go. So, now we're looking at the Strike Force missions. We're going to look at mission 1 for the majority of this video. So we know what we have to do for our objectives for this mission. So we have to get objective markers, we have to hold more than our opponent, and we have to, if they control 2 or more objective markers, then the opponent control 2 or more objective markers, and they control 1 or more objective markers. So you have to do a bunch of these things to get as many points as you can. So it's really about grabbing objectives with this mission. So which means you're going to have to try to flank your opponent. Now, that being said, that's when you go over to your secondary objectives and you look at them. And now you know what you need for your secondary objectives. You're going to be diving in and out to objective markers. So this is where the 8th edition and ITC actually comes in handy, and why I like this system so much. Because with this type of mission, you can actually choose the secondary missions that you're more than likely to accomplish. I have heard some concerns stating that it makes all of the missions the same, but at the same time, it really doesn't, because the primary missions really determine what the game actually is, and that's between 6 different missions. And then the secondaries are just the ones that you can get at your leisure as you play the game itself. Or you can build it around what your army primarily does. Say you have a rapid insertion force that is going to move forward, take command of the center stage of the board, and fight your opponent. You definitely want secondary objectives that accompany that. Where you may not be accomplishing the primary objectives, the secondary objectives can still make you win a game, though you do need to outnumber your opponent, so keep that in mind. Don't forget about your primaries, don't forget about your secondaries. Accomplish as many as you can. But in order to gauge what secondary objectives you will need, you may want to go over each and every single one of them. And that's what we're going to do today. So, secondary objectives. When you are instructed to select secondary objectives, you can select from any present here, in addition to any secondary objectives listed on the mission you are playing. Okay? You can score no more than 15 from each secondary objective you select during a mission. Any extra victory points awarded are discounted. So each one is worth 15 extra points, giving you a total of 45. I know a lot of people think that that's a lot of points, but really it's not. It's by intervals of 5. Anyone can do that. Literally anyone. Each secondary objective listed below has a category. Example, Purge the enemy. When you select secondary objectives, you cannot choose more than one of each in each category. So, you have a bunch of different categories here. You have Purge the enemy, No Mercy. You have Battlefield Supremacy, Shadow Operations, Warcraft, and that's pretty, or Warcraft. Sorry, my mind went straight to World of Warcraft. So, it doesn't exactly tell you how many you select, which I think is pretty interesting. So let's go over here and see if this actually tells us. We're going to go up to page 295. Secondary objectives. When the player are selecting their secondary objectives, they can, if they wish, choose one of the following. Interesting. Maybe it says it in the beginning. Let's go back to match play really quickly and just make sure. I'm pretty sure you select 3. Where is secondary objectives? Each player then secretly selects 3 secondary objectives for the battle and writes them down. Each can award points to the player. The secondary objective that player chooses can be found on page 284 to 285. Though some missions will include secondary objectives that can also be chosen from. Once both players have selected their secondary objectives, they reveal their secondary objectives to their opponent. So we go to page 285 for the secondary objectives, 284 and 285. Okay. So it says each secondary objective listed here has a category. When you select a secondary objective, you cannot choose more than 1 from each category. So you do have to choose different categories for your secondary objectives. So for instance, we can go with Purge the Enemy, and we can go with Assassinate. We can go with No Mercy and First Strike, and we can go with Battlefield Supremacy and go for Line Breaker. I think that's how it works. I'm pretty sure that's how it's worded. If not, I really thought it was just you select Purge the Enemy and just got 3 from it. But regardless. So, knowing that and keeping that in mind, and may or may not be wrong about that, I do apologize about that if I am, but I'm pretty sure you choose a category, choose 1 from it, choose another category, choose 1 from it, choose the 3rd category, choose 1 from it, and so on and so forth. So, with that in mind, let's go to Purge the Enemy. Under it, we have Assassinate, Bring It Down, Titan Slayer, and Slay the Warlord. As metal as we can make it sound, without being too edgy. Assassinate, score 3 victory points at the end of the battle for each enemy character model you destroy. Now, there's 2 different types of objectives for the secondary objectives. There's progressive objectives, where you have to keep track during each of the rounds themselves. This way, you can tally up how many points that you actually get at the end of the game. Then there's the end-of-game objectives, where you keep track of them at the end of the game, which is pretty simple. Personally, both of them can be solved at the end of the game, and it's really easy to keep track of for the most part, and both players do their, end-of-turn stuff pretty much at the same time, so there's really no way to miss these. Most opponents will just remind you. So, Assassinate, end of game. Score 3 victory points at the end of the game for each enemy character model you destroy. Pretty simple. You destroy 5 enemy models, you get 15 points. Most armies consist of about 5 enemy character models. So it's pretty simple. Kill all of their characters, get as many points as you can. Bring It Down. Score 2 victory points at the end of the battle for each enemy monster or vehicle with wounds characteristic of 10 or less is destroyed, and 3 victory points for each enemy monster or vehicle model with a wounds characteristic of 11 or more that are destroyed. So if you're going up against Guard and you know your opponent has a lot of vehicles, a lot of monsters, maybe going up against Nidzilla, you take this one. Assassinate for when your opponent is spamming characters and really getting those aura abilities down. You want to blast those characters, you want to select that one. Then we have Titan Slayer. Is your opponent bringing a Titan? Yes. Get Titan Slayer. You get 15 victory points for killing 2 of them. Okay? You get 10 points if you don't. If you kill only 1. Slay the Warlord. Score 6 victory points at the end of the battle if the enemy warlord is destroyed. Pretty simple. Kill your opponent's boss. Very simple. Although it doesn't give you the 15 points, it only gives you 6. So you do have to select carefully and make sure that you can try to maximize the amount of points that you put in. There is a lot of strategy when selecting your secondary objectives, and you don't have a lot of time to select your secondary objectives. You have to know what your opponent's army is, learn it very quickly, and try to match your secondary objectives to beat their army down. So a lot of strategy goes into more of the deployment phase when selecting your secondary objectives, which I really like. This is a very tactical choice. You have a very tactical choice, and it makes your deployment, your first 2 turns, extremely important because you're going to try to maximize those objectives so that you can then take them out during the later turns of the game. So that ends Purge the enemy. Then we move on to No Mercy, No Respite. Thin their ranks. End of game objective. You score 1 second. End of game objective. If you select this objective, keep a tally of kill points each time an enemy model is destroyed. Add 1 to this tally. Add 10 to the tally. Add 1 to this tally. Then in parentheses, add 10 to this tally instead if the model was destroyed, had a wound characteristic of 10 or more. A model can, if it is resurrected for any reason or was destroyed in a subsequent phase and returned to the battlefield, potentially add several victory points to this tally. Assuming it is resurrected and subsequently destroyed several times, at the end of the battle, divide your kill points by a kill point tally by 10 and round down. The resulting number is the number of victory points you score in this battle. Kill 15 things, get a bunch of points. That's pretty much it. It's really simple. You kill tanks, you get 10 points. Or anything with 10 or more wounds. I think it's 10 or more wounds, correct? Yes, 10 or more wounds, you get 10 points. You want to try to maximize the amount of points. You think that your army can leaf blower the opponent's army, you select this one. It sounds very complicated, but really it's not. It's just kill points. And then you divide it. And that's it. It's really simple math. And if this is confusing you, then you might need like higher than a 3rd grade education. Attrition. Progressive objective. Score 4 victory points at the end of the battle round if more enemy units than friendly units were destroyed this battle round. Simple enough. Kill more than your opponent killed of yours. You think your army can kill your opponent? Do this one instead of the one prior to it. While we stand, we fight. End of game objective. If you select this objective, then before the battle, you must identify which 3 models in your army, excluding a model with the fortification battlefield role, has the highest point value, and make a note of them on your army roster. If 2 or more models are tied, you get to choose. If these models have if the army has 3 or fewer models, you select all of them. A model's points cost include their war gear and all of their weapons they're equipped with. You score 5 victory points at the end of the game if these models are still there. So you select your 3 big knights, you select your 3 keepers of secrets, you select your 3 flying demon princes that are the highest point cost in your army, and you say these aren't going to die. And then your opponent goes out of their way to kill them. And then you go, wow, I should have selected something different. Because this is absolutely garbage. And unless you're running a God Hammer or you have a way of reviving your creature, which it still counts as destroyed, by the way, then yeah, don't select this one. It just seems overall bad unless you have like 3 Bane Blades or 3 of something huge that isn't going to die, and you have multiple ways of ensuring that it can get its wounds back. Even still, it seems like a poor choice because the second your opponent becomes aware that you have this objective, they're just going to kill it. And let's be real, your secondary objectives, as secret as you write them down, it's going to become common knowledge as you move around on the battlefield. First strike. Score 5 victory points at the end of the battle round. At the end of the battle, if any enemy units were destroyed in the first battle round, score an additional 3 victory points for 3 victory points if more enemy units than friendly units were destroyed in the first battle round. So this one you can get a total of 8. Again, keep that in mind. That means that you want another secondary objective that can go above 15 in order to maximize the 45 points that you're going to get. Again, it's really important. Ooh, no, actually you can't. I was wrong about this. Only 15 points at max. So yeah, if you select this one, you're only getting 8 points, but it's an easy 8 points versus the harder missions that are going to grant you not as many points. So you really have to choose these ones carefully. If you're really concerned that you can't actually destroy your opponent, then you really have to worry about this stuff. And if you're not maximizing these secondary objectives, or you're just trying to get points and then accomplish the primary objectives, there's a lot of tactics when it comes to selecting these. Battlefield Supremacy. Engage on all fronts. It's a progressive objective. Score 2 victory points at the end of each of your turns if you have one or more units from your army wholly within 3 different table quarters, and those units are all more than 6 inches from the center of the battlefield. Score 3 victory points instead. Okay, so if they're more than 6 inches away from each other, you score 2 points each turn, which is really good. And then we have score 3 victory points instead if they are, if you have 1 or more units from your army wholly within each table quarter, and those units are all more than 6 inches away from the center of the battlefield. So this is actually really good if you have a line formation and you're moving it up the battlefield and you move it within like a certain range of the center of the board itself, and you hold your position there so that you're taking up about 2 foot by 1 foot by 2 or 2 foot by 1 in the center of the board. You'll score your victory points extremely quickly so long as you're holding that, and you can move characters into them in order to hold this as well. So keep that in mind. I actually really like table quarters. It's one of the primary ones that I chose in my ITC missions because my army is so maneuverable. Then we have Line Breaker, progressive objective. You have to keep track of this each turn. Score 4 victory points at the end of the turn if 2 or more units from your army, excluding aircrafts, are wholly within your opponent's deployment zone. If you're running a close combat army, this is the one you want to get. You definitely want this. Domination. Anyway, progressive objective. Score 3 victory points if you control more than half of the total number of objective markers on the battlefield at the end of the turn. Pretty simple. End of your turn, if you hold 4 objectives and your opponent holds 2, you're getting 3 points. If you hold 1 objective and you're contesting all of the other ones, and your opponent is not controlling any, you score points. If you're holding 2 and your opponent is contesting a bunch of them, but not controlling a bunch of them, and you have more than your opponent, boom, you get points. It's pretty simple, but it is a 5-turn thing, so keep that in mind as well. A lot of these things are going to go towards later games, so you do have to prepare for that. In fact, that's why you might want to select some of the lower point scoring secondary objectives, because they're easy to max out, but once you do, well, if you don't get them, 1, you lose all your points, and if the game goes later than turn 3, you might actually be struggling later on. Okay, now we go on to the next one, which is Shadow Operations. Investigation Site, progressive objective. Score 3 victory points each time a unit from your army successfully completes one of the following actions. Investigate Site action. 1 infantry unit, excluding a character from your army, can start performing this action at the end of the movement phase if it is within 6 inches of the center of the battlefield and has no enemy units, excluding aircrafts, that are within 6 inches of the center of the battlefield. This action is complete at the end of your turn. So you control the center of the board. It sounds really, really, really complicated, but this is just King of the Hill. You put your flag in the center of the board. You go, this is my property, get off. And if there's no enemy units within 6 inches of that unit that's holding it, excluding a character, so you can use like a tank to do this, which is, nope, 1 infantry. So you do have to use like your 5-man, 5-woman, 5-boy, because they're technically a gender, 5 AdMech units to hold the center point of the battlefield and then fight forward. Again, this is another good suggestion, another good selection for a close combat army, you just leave one person behind, one unit behind, and that unit has to be within 6 inches, and you push everybody back, you're scoring easy points throughout the game. Now you do have to look out for stray fire and everything, for your opponent probably is going to try to murder that thing as quickly as possible. Once they realize that, hey, you haven't moved that thing in the center of the table yet, something's up, I'm gonna kill it. Okay, and a lot of this stuff is actually based on your opponent's reaction to the battlefield itself. Now, a lot of people are gonna hate this type of gameplay because it's new and confusing to them, and a lot of people who see confusing things, they see it as broken, or they see it as it's too big of a change and they don't like it, or they get argumentative about this. And if somebody messages me on Discord again after I said that I was recording, I'm going to slap them. But anyway, a lot of people are going to complain about this, but as you get used to it more and more, it's going to be pretty quick and pretty easy to get this all done and over with. Then we have Repair Teleport Homer. Score 5 victory points, and this is a progressive objective. Score 5 victory points each time a unit from your army successfully completes one of the following actions. Repair Teleport Homer action. One infantry unit from your army can start performing this action at the end of your movement phase if it is wholly within your opponent's deployment zone. This action is complete at the end of the next command phase, provided that the unit attempting it is wholly within your opponent's deployment zone. So if you're within your opponent's deployment zone, you declare that that unit is repairing a teleport homer, or actually you just leave them there and don't say anything because you don't have to. You then just leave them there. They have to be wholly within your opponent's deployment zone. And once they are at the end of at the next command phase, which is your opponent's command phase, you gain 5 points. Or is it your next? Perform this action at the end of your movement phase, wholly within your opponent's deployment zone. This action is complete at the end of your next combat phase. So they have to make it a full round in that spot. So kind of a good thing for another close combat army. A lot of these secondary objectives, they do favor close combat and long range, and there are some that are really good for mid-range armies as well, so I'm really liking them. And then there's Raise the Banner High, progressive end of game objective. You can select one objective. Then units in your army can perform the following action. Raise the banner. One or more infantry units from your army can start performing this action at the end of your movement phase. Each unit from your army that has started to perform this action must be in range of a different objective marker that does not have one of your banners raised upon it. See below. A unit can start this action while they are... A unit cannot start this action while there are any enemy units, excluding aircrafts, in range of the secondary objective marker. In range of the same objective marker. This action is complete at the end of the turn. If this action is successfully completed, then the objective marker is said to have one of your army's banners raised on it. The banner is removed at the start of your opponent's control of the objective marker at the start of any phase. You score 1 victory point at the end of each of your command phases and 1 victory point at the end of the battle for each objective marker on the battlefield that has your banner raised upon it. So you can get a total of 18, which then goes down to 15, but this one seems ridiculously difficult to do because you have to hold it, raise it, and then pray that your opponent doesn't even potentially touch it. So at most you're getting 3, one in the middle, one in your deployment zone, and one in the right outside your deployment zone. So let's see, it's 3, 6, 9, that's 9 objective points, 10 at the end of the game. So it's going to be pretty difficult to get. I think it's actually 12 at most, but still, I'd have to see this one in action before I actually tried to take it. Against a weaker opponent or somebody that's new to the game, I would definitely take this one to test it out a few times. And then we have Warcraft. I'm just going to call it Warcraft from now on. The World of Warcraft. Mental Interrogation. Progressive objective. Score 3 victory points each time you successfully complete the following psychic action. Mental Interrogation. Has a warp charge value of 4. One psychic can perform... One psychic character from your army can attempt to perform this psychic action in your psychic phase if it is within 18 inches of any enemy character model. Wait, so what the hell does the power do? It doesn't really do anything? Oh wait, no, Psychic Ritual, right at the bottom. I'm dumb. No, it's completely different. That's a different one. Whatever. I'm probably reading that wrong. I think you just attempt to do it, and you score 3 victory points if you do. And the game objective, score 15 victory points at the end of the battle round, or at the end of the battle, if any units from your army successfully completed the following. Psychic action 3 times during the battle. Psychic Ritual, Psychic action, warp charge value 3. 1 psychic character unit from your army can attempt to perform this psychic action in your psychic phase if it is within 6 inches of the center of the battlefield. So you do this 3 times, you get 15 points at the end of the game, which is really good if you have like a Neurothrope, any Psyker, like at all. Literally any Psyker can do this. So if you just happen to have a Psyker in your army, you might as well take one of these. Try to score that 3 victory points seems, or those 15 victory points seems pretty nice. Abhorred the Witch. You cannot select this secondary objective if your army includes any psychic units. Score 5 victory points at the end of the battle for each enemy psychic character unit that is destroyed, and 3 victory points if every other enemy psyker unit is destroyed. So this is one I would select with my Sisters of Battle since I never bring psychers. So that would be really fun to do. And with that, we are done with these secondary objectives. Overall, some are very confusing. Some of the psychic ones are very confusing. Some of the engage at all fronts just seems kind of pointless. Raise the banner seems like it won't actually get you that many points, probably 9 at most. And some of them don't get you enough points to max out the, my voice is going. Some of them don't get you enough points to max out the 45 points that you can score in total from the secondary objectives. So when you select them, you have to be very careful to make sure that you maximize the amount of points that you get, or you have to make sure that you can successfully complete those primary objectives. So with that all said, I want to know who's going to be buying this box set. Also, I will be doing a giveaway for any Xenos player that is not getting any of, actually, any player that isn't Space Marines or Necrons that is not getting the Indominus box. I will be doing a giveaway of the rulebook. I think I'm going to have a total of 2 of them to do a giveaway for, and I will be doing more information about this giveaway in my Discord and probably on Patreon. There we go. If you guys don't know about my Patreon, Patreon goes a long way to help supporting the channel. It helps keep me fed. It bought me my lunch today, as well as, well, keeping my lights on. I mean, really, Patreon has been helping me out greatly. It helps with car payments. It helps with me making these videos, making sure that I don't have to work an entire full-time job, just to make sure that I can bring you guys content, especially during COVID. With all of this stuff being shut down and everything, I couldn't get a full-time job even if I wanted to right now. So, kind of a pain. But I do want to thank you guys. I want to thank all my patrons for help supporting the channel. And I want to thank everybody who subscribes, comments, and thumbs up this video, because you guys help out in your own way and it is awesome. So if you guys have any comments or think that I got anything wrong or want to explain things in your own way, comment in the comment section down below. Also subscribe to the channel. As always, I'm NornQueenAlexis. I love you guys. Bye.